Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the White Knuckle Podcast, powered by Ozonics. Undetectable, undeniable. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to the White Knuckle Podcast. Today, we are finishing up our trail camera series with episode number 4 of 4. I have joined on two lines with me, of course, Todd Pringnitz, and on the other line, we have Tyler Tisue. Guys, how's it going today?
It's going awesome, man. I greatly appreciate you guys having me on here. It's a pleasure.
Well, it is our pleasure, Tyler. I kind of was just thinking back, trying to get ready for the show, and so I've actually known Tyler for 11 years now, if you can believe it. And
oh, wow.
11 years ago, right when I moved to Iowa, I met Tyler at the Iowa Deer Classic. We were talking at the time. I was kind of working for Lone Wolf. And I think Tyler wanted some tree stands or something. So we ended up talking, and then I started hunting with Tyler on a lease. He had a really killer lease, and he had a spot open. So long story short, hunted many years with Tyler. We actually were kind of, somewhat competing for the same deer, but in a friendly way. And dude, I can say this much, man. Tyler is even crazier than I am when it comes to whitetails.
well, thanks, man. I don't know if I'm crazier. So the one thing that I remember about Todd when I first met him, man, like he would see like a giant hoof print and he would just go insane over it. He absolutely loved it. He was so passionate about it all, but I absolutely loved it about him too. It was a cool thing. I think that's why, Todd and I hit it off so well. We were just both, really passionate guys about getting out there and hunting, big mature whitetails and just trying to, enjoy that entire process. So, but at the same time too, I've learned a lot from Todd over the years, and on running and gunning there, and so he's been a great friend, and we've had a lot of awesome stories, together over the years. So it's been a pleasure, and it's been a fun ride for I think the both of us.
Yeah, I remember in the early days, it wasn't uncommon for your name to be brought up, and that was, 10 years ago now, 8, 9, 10, something like that. You guys hunted the same lease together, like Todd said. I remember your name coming up several times.
Yeah, we. So I think originally, I think I did, White Knuckle Productions there with Todd for 1 year. And then maybe 2 years, I can't remember, how much it was there. And then I ended up actually getting into selling hunting land and real estate for a company called Midwest Whitetail Land then. And then I think we were kind of affiliated with Adrenaline Outdoors. And then eventually that ended up leading to Whitetail Properties, and I ended up hunting and filming with them and selling ground for them. So I ended up getting away from the White Knuckle Productions there, but that's where it all kind of started for me and Todd, and kind of being the beginning end of White Knuckle Productions to what it is today, which is it's far better than what it was then.
We didn't have a clue what we were doing, man.
No idea.
The cool part about Tyler is like he grew up basically hunting in Iowa, and so he's been hunting these farmland and killing some monstrous deer. Dude, how many deer over 160 have you killed with a bow? With a gun, whatever.
I don't even, to be honest, I don't even know, and I say that with respect, but I don't really, know how many it is here at this point. They've kind of all meshed, together. It's but
anyway,
the thing is that the reality is that I don't remember any of the, the ones that I kill as much as I remember the ones that I miss. So those are the ones that really ache on me, more than the ones that I've actually got.
Well, he's killed a bunch of slammers, including a couple up close to 200 inches the last few years. And there's one thing about Tyler that I really appreciate and try to learn from as much as possible. It's just his pure knowledge of hunting farmland, hunting mature deer, because you've been doing it for so long, and that's where I think it's kind of rare. Not everybody gets a chance to spend all those years, and that's what it takes, just the experience to really get to know these animals and their behaviors. But if there's one guy who can hunt down an individual animal and kill him, it's Tyler. And it has been the demise of a lot of animals, and I think that's kind of what I want to tap into your brain for, Tyler, on this show is there's one guy. You use trail cameras and have been a big part of me, learning how to use them, and you're tenacious about it. At this show, we kind of want to hit your top things, especially this time of year for guys who don't have the experience, who maybe can't even find a mature deer. How to find one, and then what your approach is, I guess, as the season progresses on trail cameras. But more than that, we always get off the beaten path and start talking tactics and stuff. So that's fine too. But essentially, like right now, you're kind of targeting some individual deer. Take us through your routine. How many cameras do you run? That's a good starting point.
Yeah. So typically, I'll try to run anywhere from, anywhere from 8 to 15 trail cameras. Kind of depends on, what it is. But, ultimately, whenever I get access to a farm, a trail camera is really the single greatest weapon that I feel like I can have. I mean, I feel like it's taken, poor hunters to good hunters to great hunters, and great hunters, to absolute serial killers of whitetails. And the reason is because we can go out there and we can narrow down, where the big deer is, because you can't kill a big deer unless he's there. So, and in the past, it was just kind of, hey, put our finger up in the air, go to a good spot, and hope a giant shows up. Or in the past, you'd drive around there and see one in the field, or you'd hear it from the neighbors. Everything was word of mouth. And so originally, when I first started doing all this stuff, I actually built my own trail cameras. I didn't have any money, and so we started off, and somebody sold these little boards, and so we used to go and hack, Sony P41s and Sony P32s, just so we could, go out there and have enough trail cameras to, try to get a reconnaissance, on some of these deer. And it was nothing compared to what the trail cameras are today. Today, it's got, all the information on there with, timestamp. It's got, the moon on there. It tells you it's taken multiple pictures there. The battery life's awesome. Didn't have that in the past. As things have progressed now, now we can go out there, and what I try to do, so like I said, I've got anywhere from, 8 to 15 trail cameras there. I'll spread them out. I put a big web out, on whatever farm I'm hunting. And so when I find, that one deer that I'm looking to find there, so what I try to determine after that is, okay, where's he coming from? What do I have for the ground, around me that he could possibly be coming in from? And so what I'll do is I'll take, some trail cameras and put them close to that one, that I just got the trail camera on, and try to get an idea of exactly where he's coming from, as well as having those still that are on a big web in case he's coming from a long ways away or he really isn't living there. I'm trying to cast that web and trying to narrow down where he's coming from, and so that's how I generally want to get on those deer. And from there, it's a lot of stuff. It's everything that comes in the line there, where maybe you have that history at that deer. I try to build the history on these deer from the time when they're young. Once they start, turn 3 years old, you hopefully get to, get some history on them there. Turn 4 or turn 5. I typically don't even hunt a deer until they're 5 or 6 years old. At that point, I've got, years of information, on that deer. And on top of it, a lot of times what I'll do, once I say I have a deer that's, let's say he's 4 years old, and I'm wanting to hunt him next year. A lot of times what I'll do is and maybe it's not in the same area that I'm hunting, that year, but I'll take a trail camera and I'll maybe go set it inside the timber in the area of where that deer is, where I feel like, I'm trying to find out where exactly this deer's bedding, where he's coming in and out of, I'll put it there a year in advance. So I'll maybe go take that trail camera and I'll put a huge card in it, brand new battery, and I'll put that trail camera in maybe a bedding area there where he's, possibly, where I think he's possibly living, just to be sure if he is. And I'll put that there a year in advance. And hopefully when I want to hunt that deer when he's 5 years old, I'll jump back over in that same area, and I got the history on that deer from the year past. Because that's really, in my opinion, that's where you really, kill big deer, is in that history and knowing them from the year prior. That's how you're killing them in the year that you're actually hunting them. And that's been, I think, my biggest success, pretty much right there.
Tyler, we call that camera setup the heavy soak.
You've been watching too much of The Deadliest Catch, Todd.
No, I do the same thing, and I've done it since I killed Barry Sanders. And I remember I was just like, I killed Barry Sanders. Who gives a crap? So I started putting cameras out in the middle of the sanctuary, all over these sensitive areas. And as soon as I looked at the camera, it made me realize, like, oh my Lord, the deer have been there the whole time. I'm just an idiot and don't know how to hunt them. Because amazingly, dude, the mature deer were there. Just, they obviously knew something was up when I was trying to hunt them. But what you learn in those soak cameras is just absolutely incredible. And I think that's part of the reason why you're so successful. And I know it's part of the reason why I've been successful over the years is you're not planning 10 minutes out. You're planning 10 years out. I mean, literally everything you do is based on, consistent success year after year after year. And it can't be looked at sometimes as, I'm trying to kill something on the next hunt. I mean, we get down to that where we're during the hunting season, you're really, really focusing on one animal and trying to make it happen. But the rest of the year, you've got to have that mindset of, it's another page in the book. You just got to keep adding pages. And sure enough, you learn something along the way every time. So now, specifically on your trail cameras, you set this time of year, mostly I'm assuming on field edges. You're setting them over potential areas where congregation, two field edges come to a point, whatever. I would say specifically for guys who are kind of fresh or trying to learn something specifically from you today, Tyler. Let's say they're looking at a farm. Maybe they've been hunting for years and they're just not getting pictures of mature deer. If there are mature bucks on a farm, where would you focus just out of the gate, brand new farm, in the middle of the summer when everything's green and lush? It can be a little bit tricky. My rule of thumb is kind of always cover. I always find the cover and go from there. What do you do?
It's a couple of variables. The variables being, what is the situation around there? Is there any type of pressure? Even though it's the summer, maybe people are going in and out or whatever it is, or if there's any you have to look at the entire circumstance. I will go to cover a lot of times. A lot of success, having that, still being close to that thick cover, but it's not always, the thick cover, especially here in the summer, because, when you have these 100-degree days, like we have here in Iowa, it's not like, you got to kind of think, like you're a deer there. The deer don't necessarily always want to be in the thickest spots right now at 100 degrees. There's no air, there's no wind, getting in there, cooling them off. They want to be kind of in these low areas there, maybe a little more open area there. So sometimes I even find them, in the draw areas, that are, granted, I'm in Iowa here, so, CRP, draws and stuff like that. I find, every now and then I'll find them, I'll go and place them by ponds, just or close to a pond. I actually have, in Iowa, we can run mineral sites, here. I'll use those, especially here. Of course, the issue is in Iowa is that you can have them anywhere close to where you're hunting. So we stick them kind of close to the road, but I have one particular spot where there's a pond, and I put it close to that pond right there, just so I can get a combination. The deer come in, maybe get something to drink, cool down, and the mineral site all right there at the same time too. But you definitely have to play a little bit of it all. You have to know your situation. Like I said, you have to go back to, knowing the circumstances around your farm. Where are the people coming from? Where's the pressure coming from? Because it's kind of the way the deer are. They're creatures of the environment, and wherever the pressure is or the non-pressure is essentially where you're going to find them.
Yeah, that's the nature of the beast too. Plus, you got with at least here in Iowa, like what you were talking about with water and all that. That's such a key thing. In this summer where it's been so dry, it's actually changed some of the movement on primary, my big bean fields that I usually get all my main summer activity. For the last month, it has been dead. And finally, in the last couple of weeks, we just got some rain, and it's just like, boom, all of a sudden the deer start showing up again. And I was actually out doing some field work yesterday afternoon and noticed that all the secondary and the small creeks that run in the bottom of all these draws have water pools now. So now all of a sudden, boom, you've got an opportunity for a deer to bed within 100 yards of water pretty much everywhere. And now it's just changed the situation a bit. And so, I mean, depending on the time of year and everything, with every farm, you're going to have to kind of follow the climate too and what's happening with weather, because that can make a significant difference. But one thing.
Yeah, it's also a time of year too, and just to make sure this, you don't want to go sticking your trail camera, way, maybe way inside the timber where you're going in, busting it in and out first and foremost. I mean, you want if you're going to go set your trail camera up, you want it in a spot that's, easy to access. The same as tree stands when you're in the middle of hunting season. There, you want it easy in, easy out. You don't want to have to be going, busting through your timber. I mean, do that as less as you can. You might have the time where that deer's kind of bedding over there. Go hang your tree stands, go bust up the area that time, but then get back out and let that area rest. So put them on the edge, put them close to where you think those deer are going to hit that edge, because deer, they're creatures of the edge anyways, and they want to go and run the edge lines, no matter what. So if you're close to where that deer's probably bedding, more than likely you're going to get a picture of that deer on that edge, that's close to that area.
Let me ask just a quick question with respect to the edge. Let me just give you a scenario. You've got a 15-acre bean field, and it's open on 3 of the 4 sides. So one of the sides has timber on it, and let's say it's 300 yards long on that side, or whatever the case may be. Do you pick, in terms of I'm assuming when you're going to go inside that edge, do you pick a trail coming out to the field? Do you pick a trail paralleling the field? Because there's always a trail paralleling the field, 10, 15, 20 yards in, whatever the case may be. And then there's always, a handful of trails coming out. How is it that you, because in Wisconsin, we can't bait, we can't use mineral, any of that stuff. So how is it that you would go about deciding where you'd throw that camera if you're going to put it on the edge in the hopes of finding out an inventory of deer?
Yeah, so if I don't have a destination, that I know these deer are wanting to go to, I'm going to try to, play the odds. And so I'm going to try to catch that trail coming out, that trail going across. I'm going to try to hit them all, at the same time. Why limit yourself to one trail, if you can go and hit 2, 3, or 4 all at the same time too. And typically, so if you, that scenario you said, where you basically have a big tree line there, 300 yards long there, I'm maybe going to look for, a low lying area, where they're going to come out. They're going to come out and make that, that cooler area that they're wanting to come out, and they'll kind of migrate there. They're not being able, to be seen a lot of times when they're in that little bit lower area. Or I'm going to, if I know that farm, really well there, maybe there's kind of a ridge top there, or a thick area that, I know that the deer like to be in, during the time there. So I'm going to put it, somewhat close to that, where I know the deer want to come out into the field at that spot. It's kind of a, you have to kind of know, where, know your farm a little bit. And if you don't know it, then you're just going to that edge there, and you're trying to hit as many trails as you can. I like lower spots, where the deer kind of feel like they're not being seen. They don't want to. It's kind of, I always try to think of everything kind of like, like if I was that deer and I was being hunted, and if I'm a deer just trying to survive out there, I'm probably not going to want to come to the very, if I'm coming out to a field edge where there's been any pressure ever in the past, I'm probably not coming to the spot, that is the most visible for everybody to see me a second I step out there. Unless I'm just looking to get a visual on what's out in the field. I'm probably going to end up moving to a spot that's a little bit lower there, where I'm out of the limelight there, where not as many people can see me. That's where the odds kind of say where a mature buck's probably going to end up going, just based on its experiences. Not always, but that's the odds that I would probably play.
Okay.
The security spot.
Correct.
So you're going to let topography, in a sense, dictate where it is that you sort of hone in on where you're going to put that camera. And
and if topography isn't there, then it's a question of if it's just pure flat ground, and then I'm going to be looking at it, from the sense, okay, what's in that timber, right in there? Is it super, super, thick, or is it completely open? Generally, if deer want to hang to a little bit, if they're coming out the field edge there, they want to kind of bank off some of that thicker stuff, right there. So that's kind of what I would try to focus on there if it was completely flat, or maybe there's a down tree. Or the other things you can do too is, if you have access, to those things, is you can go and feather those edges, where you can go and hinge cut a lot of those tree edges right there, drop them over there, and funnel those deer into the spot that you want to. Then you're getting into more of the management side of things. But I've done, stuff similar in the past, not only for trail cameras, but also, try to drive the deer into areas where, I want them to go, rather than just having a completely open timber that they can come out of.
Another thing, I've been actually doing this in the last couple of weeks, just setting trail cameras, is you've got to be adaptable on the ground. I think a lot of us will, especially guys who don't live right by where they hunt, they spend a lot of time studying maps, aerial photographs, topography, or whatever. And, they come up with their hit list. So they'll have a little map printed out. You'll put your little cute dots on there. You're going to have a trail camera here, a trail camera there. And you get there, you put feet on the ground, you go to those spots, and sometimes they just aren't the spot. Like, it's obvious. Like, there's either, tree that had blown down, or it's too open, or whatever. But one of my favorite things to do is use the rain to your benefit. If it rains on a farm, at least around here, the clay ground will hold fresh tracks for days, and you can see where every whitetail came and went out of that field. And I just did it the other day on a farm I've been hunting for 5-6 years now, and I literally kind of helped use that to dictate where I put my camera, and it just reassured me, all right, dude, there's tracks everywhere right here. I'm most likely going to get a crack at a picture of any mature buck that's hanging out on this edge. And like Tyler mentioned earlier, 10 feet, 20 feet is not going to make a difference if a buck is living there. If a buck is living there, you're going to get pictures of him. It isn't a difference of whether you're on one side of the tree or not. If you're not getting pictures of mature deer, he's probably not there. That's just the reality of it. But with that being said, as the seasons change from summer to fall, I have farms that are absolutely dead in the summertime, and come fall, as soon as they start thinking about rutting, all of a sudden, boom, the bucks just show up. So I know Tyler's does this. We all see that too. So I think we said it in one of the previous episodes. If you're not getting big mature buck pictures right now, on your primary farm, don't panic yet. But what's your rule for that, Tyler? If let's just say on your farm that you hunt there, you've got quite a bit of property to hunt. But if you haven't located a buck that you're going after going into the fall, any tips other than just putting them on scrapes?
If I can't locate them, I'm going to keep on moving trail cameras around. So I never leave. First of all, I never leave. There's very few trail cameras that I leave in one spot the entire year. There's a couple of them that, maybe on a corner passing or something like that with a scrape combination there. But I'm going to keep on working that trail camera until I can kind of hone in my deer. And if he's not on my property there, maybe I'll go ask the neighbor if I can go. And I actually had to do that last year because, the buck I was hunting last year, he wasn't living, on the property that I could hunt. So I had to go and ask, permission from the neighbor there to get on there. So that ended up happening there. But you got to keep on, narrowing it down there with the, with that trail camera, just keep on moving the edge. But and actually to the point where you said there with the scrapes, another thing I do here in the summer is, because I still like to create a destination no matter what, even if it is on the edge, is I have like this, it almost looks like a sickle, like golf club combination. And a lot of guys like to use like weed whackers and stuff like that, but I'll make mock scrapes right now without a problem. And I'll make it 4 foot wide. No problem whatsoever there. And I'll put my trail camera, right on that corner. And typically, the deer will end up making that a big time scrape the rest of the season. And I can leave that there all the way, through November, at that point. So that's another good tip. Don't be afraid to go ahead and do that. I really don't believe that you're going to go and screw up an area or anything like that by going and making a mock scrape right now by any means. Because I've been doing it for years. I'll even go and take a pee in the things there if need be. I mean, and I've just done it to test things out. And I've still had the same deer that I'm trying to hunt, still coming over and checking those things out, because they're curious animals. They want to know what's going on there. And typically, at the same time too, where the spots where I'm going to put them, like I said, if you're hitting multiple trails there, if you're hitting the trail coming out, trail going by or whatever, the does are going past there. So the bucks are going to go check that spot out there because they're thinking, well, somebody made a scrape and the does are all going past here, so I got to go check that out. So you create the destination right there. You're going to get better pictures there because of it. Another thing to, that I'll touch on while I'm thinking about it here is typically over scrapes, if we're talking, trail cameras, I like to use the black flash trail cameras if I have an opportunity right there. I've just noticed with some of the infrared ones sometimes over a scrape where they're sitting there pausing, looking at things, I've got evidence, of some mature bucks just hightailing it right from it. So I try to use those black flash ones right on those spots where I'm going to, have those deer staying in that one spot looking at it. I like to use the infrared ones just while I'm talking about the subject. I like to use the infrared ones on trails, and I like to use them on fields. Maybe place it right out in the middle of the field or a food plot and try to see which deer are coming in there, because they typically have a much bigger flash range than just a black flash a lot of times.
There's some good tips, and the one thing too is you don't have to have your trail camera 3 feet from a scrape or 3 feet from a rub. What I do here is, because I've noticed a lot of that reluctance over the years too, so I get mine back quite a bit, where so long as at night I can identify what animal it is, beyond that I really don't care anymore. I used to hunt for trail cameras pictures, because I think when we all get into trail cameras the first few years, you're just freaking gung-ho over trying to get pictures of big bucks to show your buddies and stuff. And it's fun to look at, right? So, but now I've kind of taken it back. It seems like you give them a 10-yard buffer, and it will definitely increase the number of pictures you're going to get.
Yeah, and it does. As long as you can tell the deer, a lot of times, sometimes the other thing that helps is if there's any type of background, because flash needs something to bounce off of. So those black flashes, you can increase the distance on those things a lot more if there's something that's somewhat in the background or for that flash to reflect back off of. So if you're 10 yards there and maybe it's in the timber there and then has that, something to bounce off of there, that's perfectly fine. You're going to get really clear pictures even though. But if it's a completely, if it's just an open field right there, nothing to bounce off of there, and that deer's even moving a little bit, the picture might not be quite as good because of that. So at least that's some of the experiences I've had with some of these black flash cameras.
Just a quick tip from using the Spartan cameras. If you don't use the no glow, like I don't, and maybe I should, listening to you guys, make sure again, this is just with respect to Spartan cameras. Since I've started using them this year, I've noticed that without that black, whatever it's called, the no glow, you have to turn the flash down, because it'll just white in the pitch dark. It will white out an image if the deer's within 10 yards of the camera. It's got such a long flash range. I've had to turn it down to I've had to turn it down to low. So that said, I want to ask another quick question, actually for both of you, as long as I can abuse that privilege real quick. You each mentioned, Todd, you've mentioned it at different times. Tyler, you mentioned it today, honing in on a buck. How is it that you hone in on a buck? So I'm assuming you get them on a trail edge, and from there, what do you do?
So let's see if we can paint a little bit of a scenario here. So say I have let's say a corner, a timber comes to a corner there, and I get a trail camera, picture of a really big deer, and let's say I'm hunting a 160 acre piece or something like that, and let's say like to the west, is another 30 acre timber, and to the south is maybe another 40 acre timber or something like that, both really thick bedding areas, really good areas. So say you're in a really prime spot or whatever it is, that picture of that really big deer right there. This is what I was kind of saying in the beginning there. The way I'm going to hone in is I want to find out exactly where is that deer coming from. So I maybe get that, maybe in one, I had a trail camera out there for 2 weeks. Maybe I got, maybe 3 pictures, the deer at different times. And he was coming from this, from the west one time and from the south one time there. Well, I'm going to go and I'll maybe put one close, maybe from that spot. I'll maybe put a trail camera maybe 100 yards, from the original spot to the west, maybe a trail camera 100 yards, the original spot to the south. And once again, I may not create the destiny. Maybe I'm just putting the trail camera on the edge of the finger or the edge of the timber, or I'm putting on a stick and pick or something like that. Just some way where I'm trying to get an idea of where is this deer coming from. And once I can kind of narrow that down, then I start to focus. Okay, I know he's coming from the south, and we know there's a 40 acre block of timber there that's super thick. And so now I know, okay, more than likely he's probably coming from that area. So then I'm going to go and stretch out those cameras there, and I'm probably going to try to see, okay, where is he coming out from there? And then maybe I put a trail camera a little bit closer to that thing there, and I notice, I'm getting pictures of him, a half hour after dark. Okay, maybe, so more than likely he's bedding in this thing. So then if that's the case, then the scenario I'm probably going to be looking for as I'm trying to hone down this deer is, when October comes around, okay, I'm thinking, okay, I got to kill this deer, and he's bedding over in this thing here. I'm going to look for the first nasty cold front that's going to be coming through, and more than likely, there's a really good odds if I know he's bedding there, and he's probably going to be coming out before dark if he's coming out an hour after dark on warm days or whatever it is, and so that's the scenario I'm kind of looking for to hone down, a deer if possible. And then if I know that deer, like I say, years in advance, and I know that deer wants to bed there, maybe I'll create a little food plot that's close to that bedding area there so I can entice him more, to want to come out, and be there in October. Because in my opinion, most of the time, October is the time to really be able to hone in on a big deer here in Iowa, because we can't hunt in September. So in October there, you got to kill them. Once November comes around, man, it's going to be a real free-for-all. They just they go all over the place. So it's going to be tough.
Free-for-all. It's going to get wild, man. Get wild.
That what you just talked about is something that I haven't said, but in thinking about all of the different shows, the 4 shows now that we've done on trail cameras, is that I think so often we all get caught up in getting pictures. And like I've learned from, I guess, just doing these podcasts in general, I'm not hunting the deer. I'm not hunting 20 deer. I'm hunting a deer. And so often we get caught up in, getting, I got the picture, and I keep getting pictures of the same buck. Well, who gives a darn? They're all in the dark. And I completely get what you're saying. And just a light bulb went on, because I can think of, I've got a camera on public, and I get a beautiful buck. He's a 4, 5, 6 year old, whatever. He's a big deer. He's not got a lot in the rack department, but he's a mature deer. And it just dawned on me, well, yeah, I know which way he comes in every time. But that's the way I would have expected him to come in, because he'd have to cross water to get there any other way. But, where does he go after that? And so what you're saying is you're going to back off from that spot, and now you're going to use 2 or 3 cameras, which likely all of us have access to, and you're going to try and hone in on, okay, which way is he coming from at the end of the day, because that's what's important. And if he's coming, 100 yards back, depending upon what time, that's how you're using your cameras, is just to sort of get a gauge on exactly where are they entering, where you got the original picture, correct?
Correct. Yeah, I'm trying to narrow down, essentially the area where they're comfortable coming in and out. Because the reality is that, I say maybe the buck's bedding over here, but a buck has a lot of different bedding spots. He doesn't just, they're not just bedding in just one spot.
I wish they would all live in a 10-acre patch. Wouldn't it be sweet?
Yeah, it'd make things a lot easier.
Neither of you guys would be doing it then. You'd have gone on to something else.
Oh my Lord! I would just get an adjustable sight out to 100 yards and just sit on the edge and just pound them. I'm going to simplify. Tyler is probably the most analytical hunter I've ever met, which is what I love about him, because I'm real anal in the mind, but he takes it to a whole level. Halfway through the season, when he's still going crazy with cameras, I'm just hunting. With one of my just over the years, my observations are that in the summertime, I don't really pay too much attention to the time of day, because deer they don't move. It doesn't matter, because that's not hunting season. I don't worry about time of day too much until hunting season. Once October hits, if I see one of my hit list bucks on one of my cameras during daylight, I instantly know he is killable, and he's killable right around that time. Now, if it's fresh intel, I would start hunting right away. If the conditions were right and there was a cold front, I would try to get a crack at him. With that being said,
I would actually back that up even where you're at, where you're saying he's killable during daylight. I think that once you can get close, once you have an idea of where that deer is somewhat coming out of, or maybe he's maybe focusing on this doe group or something like that, just like you were starting to go after there, you can get ahead of the game there by knowing what front is coming. If you have a an October, let's say it's October 7th or 8th or 9th or whatever it is, and it's been 75 degrees, and all of a sudden you get that day where it drops down to 60 there, and a northwest wind's cooking through there, and it came right in the morning. More than likely in the evening, yeah, there's going to be a mature buck on his feet in that area. So if you know that deer's kind of wanting to be in that area, even at night, there, if it's within sometimes a few hours or whatever it is, you can be ahead of the game. You don't have to wait to necessarily know if that deer's in daylight, or hey, you got the trail camera picture of him in daylight. You already know he's going to kind of be there, anyway. So get ahead of the game, there, rather than waiting, to get that picture. Get ahead of it. Look at the weather there on that end, and then be there when he goes there.
You have to follow your gut on this stuff, because I can't tell you the number of times where I haven't had a daytime picture of a mature buck, but the conditions were right, the time of year was right, and I just had this feeling. And you go in there, and you oftentimes that's when you'll kill him, and it will be literally, if you check your camera, it's the first time he's been in there because the conditions were right, the time of year was right. So you do have to follow your gut a lot, and that's where I think if I know where a big buck is and I know his core area, I don't even worry about cameras at that point, because now I'm hunting him. I think guys fall into a trap where they start hunting for pictures and they keep moving cameras around a lot of times and getting into areas and screwing it up when they already have them pretty nailed down. But you have to get creative and find ways to hunt on all sides of those core areas, if possible, for any wind. But while we've been going through this whole conversation, I just thought of something, and I'm wondering if anybody has it. How cool would it be if there was a wind indicator on trail cameras where you would know what the wind direction and what the wind speed was when you got a picture?
Well, you can actually do that.
How?
Well, there's a website called, I believe it's Wonderground. That's W. William Underground. You can go
That's
in.
I use all the time.
Yeah, I've done the same thing and tried to figure it out. You can go in, find out what the barometric pressure is, what the wind speed was at that particular time. Correct, Tyler?
You can look up all that history there, and it shows the averages during that time and what it was.
I don't want to have to look anything up, guys. I want to.
I know what Todd's getting at. Todd's getting at, hey, you have a trail camera right there, and it says, that this deer came through, and it's got a half moon there, and it came through at 7:45 in the morning there, and the wind was out of the northeast at that time. I think it'd just be tough, until they get to the point where GPS is directly on top of these cameras, where it's pulling the exact data out of that spot, because farm 10 miles away, might be southeast winds when I'm a straight east wind or northeast wind. So it's a tough combination to possibly.
The predominant wind at that time in that particular spot, in that bottom or on that ridge top, the wind was not the same as what the predominant wind is shown. So if we need to get Will on that immediately, and I expect it for this coming season if possible.
Well, and to tell you the truth, I'm not and that's not, to be honest with you, that's probably not something that would interest me as much, because I really don't look at, deer like, oh, he moved in this wind or something like that. I'm not sure I necessarily believe that, that a deer only moves in with certain winds. I've just witnessed too many times where, they come out in all different winds, not necessarily a rhyme or reason or that necessarily it's in their face. Maybe super high pressured areas there where they're, where it's just absolute survival the second that they get there, that the wind has to be, in their favor. But I haven't had to deal with that scenario, so it wouldn't be, something that'd be as valuable to me, on that. But that said, I just like to use the wind. I always use the wind in my favor, no matter what, and just try to get as close to the big deer as I can. That's really the only thing you can do while cutting that wind possibly too.
Todd's described you as a relatively, what's the word I'm looking for? Meticulous guy, probably like Todd.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's got to be something that you do uh, to your cameras when you're setting them up. There's what process do you go through when you set the camera up to ensure that you know it's taking a picture and you haven't done anything wrong, and that when you come back in 2 weeks or when you give it a long soak, as Todd calls it, you're gonna have the desired result, or at least a bunch of pictures. Is there any tips you can give us on that?
Yeah, I mean, well, know your camera. In the past, here for the most part there, I've used Reconics, and I've had very good luck, with Reconics there. I'm actually going to be trying out some of the Spartan cams this year. But typically, I have a process, that I go through there. Typically, if I'm, let's just maybe talk about, what type of settings and stuff. If I'm going to if I'm putting over a scrape location, I'm typically putting, I like 3 pictures, over that scrape location, right there with maybe like a 1 second delay time, and then maybe a 30-second rest time. So that way you're not just blowing up your, and just putting a whole bunch of load on top of your cards there where it's filled up in no time. So that way when you go back, the other thing is, lithium batteries, make sure they're good. I always refresh all of my batteries at the very beginning of the season. Typically, they're with my trail cameras, they last through the entire season, because of that. And then, make sure that so what I always do, I always set that trail camera there, and I take a step back and I make sure that it's pointed the exact way that I want it. And a lot of times, what I'll do is I'll go back, and on my cameras there, I can actually see pictures on a lot of them. So what I'll go do is I'll just go and open that up and see that it took some pictures. It'll wrap off 3 pictures there, of my ugly butt being right in front of the camera. And so I'll go take a look at that, make sure it's on, turn it, put it back on camera, and good to go. It's pointing in the right direction. So that's
You're
typically
so
the
vain,
process.
Tyler. You're so vain.
You know what? It's after doing this for so many years, I just got a process there, and that's just the way it has to be. Otherwise I'll screw something up.
I have a really easy way to do it too that I always do. I always wear white t-shirts or light colored t-shirts and hats in the field during the summer because it's so hot here. I just back up and look for my reflection, and literally you can see. No, seriously, right in the LED screens, they have a reflective surface. You can see your reflection, and so I'll back out until I see the white, and then is it waist high at 10 feet where I need it to be? If not, I go adjust it. And most cameras, I will go back and forth a half dozen times before I finally get the right angle. Specifically on field edges where you've got topography involved, either the field goes up or the field goes down. Sometimes the camera can be deceiving on what it's actually looking at, and on my field edge sets, I want to have a snapshot of what else is in that field when I get a picture.
Yep.
So usually that means getting the camera up and on a higher angle so that, maybe you'll only catch the top of the deer that's right in front of the camera, but so long as I can tell what it is, I don't care. But I want to be able to, so if a deer walks right in front of the camera, I want to be able to see what's out in the field behind it. It's just more intel, and you can sure as heck watch. I have a couple cameras set where I can see 300-400 yards across, and every evening when the first deer hits the field, you get a snapshot of what's out there, and you can see where the deer have been coming and going from based on where the groups are. And dude, anytime I can get any additional information, I'm going to get it. So that's kind of my rule of thumb anyway, is the reflectory test, and it works every time for me.
That's a good point. I didn't I've never done the reflectory thing out there.
Todd,
or a laser pointer.
I used to have a camera with one of those on it. I don't remember what kind it was, but didn't some of them have a laser on it?
I don't know, man. I know.
Yeah, I don't know if I've seen that either. I've just seen the red dot, going off, but I don't know about the laser.
I've seen them on. I've seen them on great white killer sharks before.
Oh, Todd.
Freaking laser beam, man.
Tyler, it's so hard to keep him on task.
Trust me, I know he's ADD all day.
I know.
But yeah, I mean, so anyway, it's us staying on point here. But trail cameras, without a doubt. I mean, if you're not using them at this point, there, you're definitely at a disadvantage in finding that big deer that you're wanting to go after. 100% that it's changed the way that I've hunted, what I've learned about hunting. There's so much that you can learn from these things, and the more you get, actually, thinking about this, I remember, talking with Todd here in the past where I used to guide, and when I was in college, and this was when trail cameras were maybe just getting introduced, and at the time, it was either you saw the deer or whatever it was, but the things that I started to learn is I put 4, 5 or 6 hunters out, and I was getting all this information on what these deer were doing. And then when this trail camera started to come out, then it was essentially I was doing the same thing, just without putting a whole bunch of hunters on the ground in order to figure that out. So just the most useful tools that a hunter can have. And it's been I think it's been the one thing that that's helped me be able to focus on these, focus in on where these big deer are, because there's sometimes where some of these big deer, man, I had one time where the giant I was chasing last year, and I was hunting, and all of a sudden one trail camera that I just had randomly, like probably 3/4 of a mile away in a different spot, he showed up on it, and I'm like, what in the world are you doing over here? And it just threw my whole entire game off. I was just like thinking, oh God, I hope this deer isn't stuck over here now, and why is he over here? And I was going through all these different scenarios. Okay, do I have to put anything? Sure enough, he ended up coming back to his home core area that he was just kind of, it was October 26th, I remember the date. He was just kind of going and checking out probably some different does in different areas after he checked out his home core does that he was doing. So it's every single one of these giant bucks have different personalities. I mean, some travel further than others. Some travel a good decent bit. That I've learned over the years, and some are just they're just absolute hermits. So you got to adjust to the deer you're going after. There's not an exact science to killing one specific deer. You absolutely have to learn, what that deer is motivated to go and do, and figure out ways, how to kill him in between that, or how to kill him when he's going back to his bed. There's so many different scenarios, to kill on a big deer and it's what drives me every single day. I said it earlier, the things that drive me are the misses, or the deer that I didn't kill. I've missed some giant deer. I've absolutely missed some giant deer in the past, and I've not killed some giant deer in the past, and those are the ones that haunt me more than anything, because those are the ones that, okay, what could I have done different? What did I do wrong? And typically throughout my career, I've done a lot of things wrong, in order to figure out what to do right. As I've gotten older, I've gotten smarter. I don't hunt that much, believe it or not. I'm not out there hunting every single day. My farm's 2 hours away, from where I live. And so whenever I make a decision to go hunt, it's typically, it's got to be for a reason. In October there, I'm pretty much, I know, if there's some weather coming, I'm probably going to be, down there on the farm. And like I said before there, the biggest advantage I think that you could do as a hunter, if you have access to a farm, multiple years in advance, is get that data on that deer in prior years. It will help you kill that deer in the years going forward. Then at that point, you're not really looking to run the trail cameras as much on that specific deer at that point. What you're looking to do is take the data that you've had in previous years, and you've got your trail cameras now that are just telling you, hey, the deer's still in the area. He's still right here. But now at this point, you've had a year or 2 years, of data on that deer. He's there. You don't have to go and run trail cameras on that. You go running on another deer that's 3 or 4 years old. That you want to go and hunt in a couple of years. That's where you're going to run the majority of your trail cameras, maybe then. Because once you got that deer somewhat figured out from years past, typically it's fallen in line unless there's outside scenarios that change it, which that certainly happens. If there's no outside circumstances that change that, typically he's going to be somewhat on the same route. Not always, but typically they will be. The odds say that he will be. So I think that's the biggest key is do your homework way in advance. I mean, that's getting that reconnaissance through. When you're going out there and shed hunting, in in February and March, getting out there and figuring out exactly where you're wanting to put that tree stand at. And why is that? Okay, so now you know that deer was bedding over here. Why is he wanting to bed over here? Where is he coming out of? Where's the trails that he's going to be using here? How can I manipulate this to get him into this area? Everything's done, way in advance. That's how a lot of these guys who consistently, kill a big deer year after year after year, they're doing it way in advance. I mean, these things, they're not coming into, rolling in, October 1st, or November 1st into wherever and just setting up shop and hoping to kill a big deer. You're just throwing a dart out there, trying to do it if that's the case there. But if you want to consistently, kill big animals, the research has to be done in the beginning, and you have to get all that data, way in advance there, and you will be successful more times than not, guaranteed. Put the odds in your favor, and that's how you do it.
Oh, and one of the things, I think we all realize, anybody who has a head on their shoulders realizes that it takes hard work to kill big animals. But with that being said, I know over the years, I have wasted so much time doing unnecessary work in the wrong areas. Once you build that history like Tyler's talking about, you gain confidence in certain areas, and that allows you to mentally go in there, put the work in to set your stands in advance, to hang your trail cameras and all that. And there's no secret, man. The reason why Tyler's been so successful over the years is twofold. One, because he puts in the work, but two, he doesn't give up. He's tenacious. Tyler's the last dude on earth I would want hunting me, because he absolutely will grind it and kill you. And I remember past years where I had long been tagged out, brutal cold weather, and Tyler's still grinding away. And he usually pulls one out of his cap at the last moment if that's what it takes. But dude, you don't give up. And that's the tough part to explain to people, is that they see all the bucks you've killed, or maybe some of the bucks I've killed, and they're like, oh, geez, these guys, they got the farm, right? Or, they've got it figured out. All they got to do is hunt the same tree stands that year. And people have no idea. I mean, every year you've got to really you don't have to start from scratch, but if you want to stay ahead of these animals, you have to be willing to get creative, put in the work, but also be efficient about it.
It's certainly, just like Todd said, it's not exactly a secret to life. You work hard, and somehow the benefits end up being in your favor. And I think that's, on my end, Todd's been with me multiple times, where, it's 100 degrees, and I'm going to go out, and me and Todd have done this together, actually, I'm going to go out and I'm going to hang in tree stands. I'm going to try to get, 8, 9 tree stands maybe knocked out in that day. I don't care whether it's 100 degrees, or not. That's the time that I have. That's the time that I'm doing. Where a lot of guys are going out there and wanting to be on, boats out there, drinking, playing on the lake there. Well, if you want to kill big deer, and that's the key, you got to want to kill big deer. And if you want to kill big deer, you have to go and you have to put that effort in during that time. You have to sacrifice a lot of things, in order to achieve that. And so I think that's kind of I think that's just been in mind. I love hunting these whitetails. Once I have a giant, that I'm going after, it gets under my skin, and then that's all I can think about, and that's what I know that I want to accomplish. And I know the only way to accomplish that is by getting every single bit of work that I can possibly get done on my own terms, and then let God, play it out from there. So, and that's the best thing you can do, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I was listening to either a show or a podcast recently, and I think it was Mark Jury on it and he said it perfectly. If you're wondering why you're not killing big bucks, take a look in the mirror. And
right. 100%.
The bottom line, that since Todd and I started doing these, the themes throughout show in and out every time, it seems like we walk away, or I walk away with the same thing, and that's, if you work hard, you win. And maybe you don't win every time, but the bottom line is, just like I tell my son when I drop him off at school, you got to do the work. That's just period. You got to do the work. Like you said, it'd be great to be, I now live on the Wisconsin River, and it would have been great the last 5 weeks in a row to be out in the boat, pounding away at the walleyes, but instead I've been hoofing it around all these different public hunting areas, and hopefully that pays off. And I know one thing: if I don't do it, it's not going to pay off.
Correct. 100%. I mean, and here's the thing is that when I started, doing all this stuff too, and you always hear, guys, well, if I had that ground, or if I was in that scenario, if I was in that tree stand, the thing is that there's not anybody out there that can accomplish that stuff if they truly want it. I mean, I bet you every single one of those guys, that are listening right now, where they've maybe said that in the past, if they think about whatever it is that they are looking to accomplish actually in their life, they probably accomplished that, and maybe it wasn't big whitetails, but if they really wanted it to be big whitetails, it probably would be. So the thing is that if you want to be able to go out there, hunt big whitetails, I've stayed in Iowa all my life, not because there's a whole ton of things to necessarily go out and do in Iowa. It's that I want to kill big whitetails. I love big whitetails.
By the way, I can back that statement.
Exactly. It's not like it's not like we got a ton of other things going on here in Iowa as much. And I love Iowa. I was born and raised here. But like I said, I've stuck around because that's kind of the sacrifice there that I want to be able to, as a resident, hunt whitetails, big whitetails year in and year out. That was a sacrifice there. I mean, that's I've in the past there I've lived like just nothing. I've lived absolutely broke, but I bought a farm, a long time ago. I bought 176 acres that I went on with a partner, years ago, and that farm was absolutely awesome, by the way, but I sacrificed an absolute lot, in order to, make it happen. So it's just a question of what are you willing to sacrifice, if you want to kill big deer. And that's kind of the message, that, I put out there to anybody who's saying, well, that guy has, this and this and this, because I can tell you right now, anybody who has that, I mean, unless everything was just handed down to them, which there are those, cases there. But for the most part, the guys who have that stuff, they work their tails off. So unless it's big, killing big whitetails, if that's what you want to do, you can find the path without a doubt, because I've seen it happen tons of times. You just have to want it.
And be willing to do anything to get it, including knocking on doors of strangers and things like that. And that's where you and I think have.
So long as it's legal, yeah.
Yeah, well, no, absolutely. But no, I mean, there's always a story. I mean, I know a lot of the bucks Tyler's hunted over the last several years, and I know what he had to do to get them. And I've been in the same boat where, if the buck's over there and you haven't talked to that landowner, you need to go talk to that landowner. If you, and you're deep down in the pit of your stomach, in order to kill that deer, you probably have to move your stand. You move your stand. There are so many guys who get halfway through the season and they get tired, they get exhausted, things are not going their way, and that's when truly success shines, is when you just will not give up and, okay, it's not working in these stands, then I'm going to hunt areas that I haven't hunted yet and try to make something happen. And that's where you just got to keep grinding. And dude, Tyler, how many buddies have we known over the years who about the 8th or 9th or 10th, either they're out of vacation time, their wife makes them go home, or they're just plain done because they haven't been seeing deer and they give up?
A good majority of them, probably, obviously about 90% of them, and which I would actually say, I love that beginning part of November. That's everybody's got to be in the woods. But man, I'll tell you, if at least here in Iowa, if you're not out there in that kind of that later part there, like 17th to 23rd, it's you're missing out. Because
most guys burn. Awesome time. Most guys burn themselves out, and we used to be them guys. I used to hunt. God, remember the days when we used to hunt every day through the season. Tyler probably thought we were crazy, and we were. But I think a lot of guys do that, especially when they get pictures of these big bucks, and they just can't help themselves. They got to be out there. They got to be trying to kill them, because if I don't kill them, the neighbor's going to kill them. If I don't kill them, the neighbor's going to kill them. Well, that's going to drive that deer out of that territory before he's even killable, because he ain't going to be moving out of that bedding area walking around during daylight if he's a big mature deer. The two don't go together most of the time, except for those rare occurrences during late October, during the rut. But sometimes the best thing you can do is not hunt, and then when it's time, go crazy.
Well, it's funny that you say that. So I always keep notes, every single year. Every single time I get in a tree stand there, I say, what I saw, what the wind was, what the barometric pressure was. So I do that on every single day, that I go in and hunt. But one of the things that I always put, at the top of my note list, every single year is, hey, move tree stands to here, and the thing that I had at the top of it was, this year was be smart and have a reason, for why you're wanting to hunt that exact spot. Because I think as I've gotten older, like I said, I don't hunt as much as I used to. I mean, I just don't. It's been completely, counterproductive. And so now I just take a scenario where, the weather's right, or whatever situation, it is, there where I have to have a reason, exactly to be there. Otherwise keep my butt out. You're just burning up ground otherwise, and you're running deer out, and you're putting scent down that you don't necessarily need to be. I've made those mistakes over the years and in the past, of kind of blowing up an area there where I didn't necessarily have to, and the deer didn't show up. So that was a headline of mine this year. Have a actual reason of why you want to be there. Don't just go there. Have that actual reason, why you believe that deer is going to be going there. And so that's what I'm always trying to create in my head is why does the deer, want to be in this area? What's going to get a 5 or 6 year old deer up on his feet, today? And so those are the scenarios I go through in my head, and then I paint it. Okay, if he's, if I know that, the dad on that deer, I need that reason to be there, and that's how I base it now. Like I said, my farm's 2 hours away there, and I got a family and a little girl at home now, and so the time I spend away, has to be valuable, and it has to be good, good time away when I do it. So I have that scenario, the best way that I can anymore.
Well, cool. Well, we're just about out of time, or out of time. Todd, is there anything else you wanted to ask prior to wrapping this up?
No, I just out of my own curiosity, just like Rambo, and Rambo was one of the bucks Tyler killed, another one was Buccaneer. These top 2 or 3 bucks that you have hunted over the years. I know the area that you're hunting. How many generally? We're talking the time we're out there and you're out there really chasing them. Late October, around the 25th, 26th, 27th, around there through mid to late November. How many core areas generally did your bucks have in the property that you hunted? I've kind of noticed, at least on my end here, most of the bucks that I've gotten to know and killed usually have between 3 and 6 core areas. It seems like they spend certain amount of time in each one of them, depending on the time of the year and depending on the stage of the rut. What have you noticed as far as like core areas of the big ones that you've been hunting? How many generally, or what have there been some variation?
So just to give a little background on that, a lot of areas that I hunt to are a lot of, are draws, and Rambo in particular, he maybe had 2, core areas that he had. Because he didn't have as much ground, to work on, but the areas where he was in was extremely thick, and I actually ended up killing him on October 31st on a cold front in one of those really thick areas, and that was, and I knew that was his core area. Buccaneer, and both these deer were 6 years old, by the way, and Buccaneer was, he had 3 core areas, where he was at. And another thing actually about him, and one of his core areas that I always thought was just just so cool. The area where I was hunting and the farm that he lived on the majority of the time, believe it or not, might as well have been public hunting. I mean, just guys just going in and out, blasting away. But what Buccaneer did is he lived on the edge of that, almost on the fence line right there on the east side of this property there. And I believe he wanted that as his core because he knew that's where these people were coming. He could watch them, all coming in, coming out there. He knew what was going on. That's where all the pressure was always coming at him, in the past. And so he sat there in order to watch that pressure, come at him. And then he had core areas, outside of around, and around that, where I think typically is the reason why they're core areas was no other reason than that's just where the does were. But I believe he had his main one in October that he liked to live in, and it was in that spot, which might as well have been public hunting. So both of those deer really didn't have, really a lot of core areas at all. And I found, certainly as these deer have gotten older, that their core areas have shrunk, quite a bit. It's I can give you the history of every single one of those deer and where they were at, from the time they were 3 years old until they were 6 years old. And I can show you trail cameras, when they were 3 years old and 4 years old, and they were, maybe a half mile, from that core area, at that time. And as they turned, 5 and 6 years old, those core areas started to shrink, a lot. And so that's certainly, another thing that you start to notice about these big, and it's always in those spots, that if you looked at it and you start to know your farm and you go walk it during shed season, you're like, man, this thing's, really thick here. Or you get up on this ridge, and you can, stick on that ridge and you can see everything around you. There's a nice funnel down below. You can go and, you can check the does as they come through and everything else. You can get in and see the scenarios, of why these deer are here. And you start to learn, about these, old bucks and the reasons why they want to be there. And so that's so over the years, as I've got to know these deer and watch them through the years, that's how you go into those areas, in shed season, and you learn, why are they here? And you start asking yourself, why do you want to be in this spot? And it starts to make more and more sense, and where these big bucks, want to bed. And as you build that knowledge, over time, then it just, you can get ahead of the game. Then it's like, well, if a deer's 5 or 6 year old, this is kind of the area it looks like that. He's kind of coming from this way. More than likely, you can kind of narrow it down. He's probably going to be bedding in that area.
And for the food plot guys, like this is the time of year I'm going to be replanting some of my corn and some of these other things. But I can create an area I know he's going to want to get to. Now, whether he's going to get there during daylight or not, I don't care, because generally I'm going to have my food plot spots and my blinds and all that, but I'm going to have a lot of stands on the interior trying to cut him off where he's trying to get downwind of those food plots, 300-400 yards downwind. And that's actually how I killed my buck last year. But what I've really focused in on is the core areas of these bucks, where they're going to likely be bedding on a particular day based on what the wind direction is. And I try to just recreate that scenario on every single hunt. And you can do that. Once you find their core area, depending on the wind, they're going to be bedding on different sides of those ridges. And then you just got to kind of put 2 and 2 together on how can I get in there, cut him off between where he's bedded and where he wants to go without being detected along the way. If you can figure that out, you'll kill him every single time.
Yeah, and you and me have even had this discussion, though, although a lot of the times when I've gotten into these, where I believe this, the buck's bedding, and a lot of times those areas, the wind is really, really swirly in those areas. I found a lot of mature bucks for some reason like to be in those areas where the wind swirls in there. It's not necessarily a straight wind. And so that's another scenario, and it becomes extremely hard to hunt them in those areas because of it. Because if you're in there, that wind's going to swirl up to them. They know that too. I mean, they've mastered the wind. They know it 10 times better than we'll ever even concede it. But I've noticed that to be another pattern. Of big mature whitetails, they like to be in areas where the wind swirls.
Absolutely. We were just covering that with Dan Infalt, and it's generally in areas of topography, where you've got deep ravines and stuff. Right. But we probably need to cut it right now. But what we want to do for sure, I want to get another podcast with you, Tyler, just talking specifically about wind, scent, and how deer use it, because you are crazy when it comes to using the wind to your benefit and knowing barometric pressure, knowing how thermals work, and you've taught me a lot about those things over the years. So we're going to do that on a podcast. But thank you very, very much for your time. We're going to get into some other stuff with you later on. I know I'd like to make you a regular guest. And Jason, any final closing thoughts?
No, thanks for coming on the show, and I appreciate you taking time out of your day. And time is money, I get that, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, both Jason, Todd, no, I greatly appreciate you guys having me on. It's always a pleasure to talk deer. Me and Todd have been doing it for years here, and so it's fun for us to kind of have this conversation and get out to the masses there. So I'm always happy to help. And if you guys ever need anything, just let me know. And yeah, look forward to talking more with you guys here in the future.
Like I told Dan Infault when we did our podcast last week, unfortunately for you, I've now got your cell phone number. So if Todd doesn't answer, one of you two probably will.
Hey, it's fun for me when hunting season comes around because Tyler's always after him or after one. So usually him and I have similar scenarios going on. So he's the guy I always we go back and forth constantly about, what are you seeing, what are you not seeing, whatever. And it kind of gives you a little bit of mental support, at least through the tough times. But anyway, I got to get going.
Yeah, I was going to say not to extend this year, but this is actually the first year where I don't have an exact deer that I'm wanting to go after, and I'm actually really excited about that because now I get to go hunt a whole bunch of different killer areas going after multiple, big deer. Not them giant, but multiple big deer. So I'm actually really looking forward to that this year.
Well, there you have it, our conversation with Mr. Tyler Tisue. Thanks again, Tyler, for coming on the show, and we'll definitely be checking back in with you to see how your season is going. That pretty much wraps up our trail camera series. Before I let you go, though, just a couple of things to mention. Again, we can always use your reviews on iTunes or on Stitcher, depending upon which device you use. If you have an Apple device, obviously, then go ahead to iTunes and give us a review. If you use Stitcher, give us a review on there. If you don't know how to download the podcast for iPad, iPod, whatever, listeners, grab your device and go to the iTunes store, search for White Knuckle Podcast. This will help you to download the free podcast app produced by Apple, and then you can subscribe to that show from within that app. Every time we produce an episode, it will get downloaded right to your device. For Android listeners, download the Stitcher app, which is also free, and search again for White Knuckle Podcast and do the same thing. And we will also push a episode to you every time we produce one. With that, thanks again for listening to the show. Congratulations to the winner of the Ozonics prize last week. It'll be on our website, on our Facebook page tomorrow morning, or Monday morning, the 7th of August. Yeah, August. So with that, that's about all I have. Jason out.